Hello, thank you for listening to A Glimpse of the Kingdom. I am Dr. David Pendergrass. Something when I was growing up that was confusing to me for a long time was how to talk about sin with people. And what I mean, of course, is not only how to talk about it, but how to act around it, how to be around it. It was a confusing thing because as you're growing up as a child, and of course then the youth group, you see Christianity more about rules than more than a relationship, which is kind of cheesy because it is a relationship, but yes, there are rules involved too. But when you're a teenager, the word rule is one of the worst words on the planet. And so you sometimes, of course, just either rebel against the rules or you try to embrace them and live perfectly and so forth. It's difficult for most teenagers to have that middle balance of, I understand the value of rules, but also don't want to be told what to do and so forth. So you have this mixture between, I want to embrace the fact that Christianity is true, but when I see things like in the New Testament of not to gossip and not to hurt people and treat as you want to be treated and love and be tenderhearted and forgiving, and we could go through multiple verses all through the New Testament. But those are doable enough, we think, being kind and so forth. That's not very controversial. But then there are other things that, depending on your faith tradition, it might be you were taught not to drink, not to smoke, not to chew tobacco, and of course not to be homosexual in behavior, not to be gossips and so forth. We get a little more controversial because people kind of go, well, yeah, I know I shouldn't gossip, kind of, sort of, but this other stuff could just gets harder to deal with. And through the years, what I have discovered, I've been in church ministry now for, I guess, 16 years, but I've been in church for over 30, and I've noticed that in general, in my experience, across multiple denominations, people don't know really what to do with the fact that the New Testament prohibits certain behavior, admonishes the person not to do it, while embracing other behavior. They don't know what to do with it because in our culture today, and certainly I'm from America, so in American culture I can speak with quite confidence, that there is one chief sin in America, and it is intolerance. Or to say it by its parallel cousin word, judge. If you want to shut down any conversation ever in America, you say you're intolerant. You say you're a bigot. You say, I'm offended. That's how you shut everything down. I mean, think about it. How many times have you been in a conversation? How many times have you heard a conversation in your own life, not to mention on the news and the media and so forth, where all a person has to do is to say, don't judge me. Oh, my Lord, how many times I've seen people backpedal. Oh, I didn't mean, I was just saying, I'm not saying, no, That kind of nonsense just plays the game that pagans play. Because in a postmodern relativistic mindset, we cannot ever tell a person that he or she is wrong. It's called a social contract theory. It's where we haven't explicitly written down these rules, but everybody goes wink, 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 we understand it. I go into stand in a line at, I don't know, Chipotle. If I were to go right in the front of the line, people, hey, what are you doing? Don't get in front of me. Now, I could look back at them and say, where's the sign that tells me to wait in line? What manual did you read to tell how to do this? Who are you to tell me? No one's going to say that. Everyone knows with any half a brain, any half of parenting that's ever happened to them in their lives, you wait at the end of the line. That's why it perturbs people so much when you get in front of them, because they say, what? It's not fair. Now, the reason why we all, quote unquote, just know that you shouldn't do it is not just based on the moral law inside of us, but there's social etiquette involved. We know how lines work. And I have never, ever in my life been to a fast food restaurant or anything, the DMV. I've never seen a sign that says, wait your turn at the end of the line where you first came in. We just know that's what you're supposed to do. Okay, that's social contract theory, the social contract that we all share. And I'm saying there's a bunch of things sociologists will tell us that with which we all agree we shouldn't be doing or should be doing, but no one has really said it explicitly per se. One of, if not the chief, quote unquote, you might say moral sin in social contract in America today is this sense of you cannot be judged. You cannot be made to be offended. You cannot be considered a bigot. You cannot be a person who is closed-minded. Anything that demonstrates the other person is wrong and you think you're right, you can't do it. So because of that, it makes it very difficult for the average American Christian, at least, to stand up for things that a culture says is wrong or right. The point is, if we have a differing view, it's very difficult. Because when American Christians act American, it scares them to death to stand up for truth. It scares us to death. Well, I can't say that. Why? Why can't you say murdering, or rather killing innocent human lives in a mother's womb is a bad choice? That innocent human life doesn't deserve to be killed, regardless if their dad's a rapist or whatever the case may be. You know why? Because I can't tell people they're wrong. Why can't I say, when everyone's giving high fives and breaking out the champagne because their lovers just got married and they're gay, why can't you not act excited? Why? Because they might think I'm judging them, that I'm a bigot, that I'm closed-minded. Why can't Christians bring up the word Jesus at work? Because what would they think about me? We are petrified. We are playing by the rules of the pagan game. And it's the idea, once more, that you cannot tell a person they're wrong. You can't even imply it. You can't even make a face, or you'll get sued or made fun of. Well, there's several comments about that, which I'm not going to say much about here, but just one quick thing is, it's a real shame that when you live in the safest, probably safest country in the world when it comes to religious freedom, that we're petrified. When there are people around the world who are literally, not metaphorically, but being killed, beheaded, and so forth because of their identity and their affinity with Jesus of Nazareth. We live in a world where, I live in a country where, the worst thing that's going to happen is I get made fun of. Maybe I don't get that job. Okay. But I'm not going to get killed. In any case, now you see how I'm pulling this all together, I hope, that when I was growing up, and I was so affected and infected by this American relativistic crap that I can't stand up for something that's different from society. I can't do that because then I'd be judgmental, then I'd be a bigot. How do I navigate this world? How do I believe in a religion that has particular moral claims, very particular moral claims, by the way, not vague ones, but very particular ones, in a society that absolutely prohibits me from standing up for a view that disagrees with them? How do you do it? Well, for a long time I didn't know, and I've never heard a pastor preach about it well. I've never heard scholars talk about it well. But as I've grown up through the years, I've really reflected on it a whole lot. And it seems to me that I've come to what I think is a very good response. And so I have preached this and I've taught this for several years now, and I'm going to do a podcast on it. And that is to say this: Christians, it seems to me that you and I need to get real clear about two things. There's style and there's content. There's style and there's content. I'm not a medical professional, but I know medical professionals. And from what I understand, they're trained in what's called bedside manner. And then, of course, the content of their specialty. And they're different things. And we've all met those doctors who have horrible bedside manner, horrible style. They're just rigid or robotic, or they're punks, or they're condescending, or they're critical parent nonsense. We've also met doctors, haven't you, who have really good bedside manner. They're calming. They're courteous. They want to make sure you understand. You really do feel like you're not just a number or a patient. You're a human being. They know your name. They build a relationship with you. And you feel like you're supported and validated in the whole process. Even though the news might be bad, you feel like you're supported. Would you rather have a professional, medical professional, lie to you about your condition? I mean, let's be honest. I'm not saying the moment maybe you're scared and you don't want to hear the bad news, but in reality, wouldn't you rather hear the truth? But certainly wouldn't you rather hear the truth from a person who seemed to really care about you? Even if you disagree with the doctor's assessment and said, I need other people's opinion too, the doctor's going to say, fine, go get it. That's fine. Absolutely. You need to go get that. Wouldn't you rather hear the truth? And wouldn't you rather hear the truth from a person you thought cared about you? That's the distinction between style and content. So Christians, When there is a particular sin issue mentioned, and sin is one of those scary, scary, scary words that you don't hear much in church ever anymore, and it's because of this, in my view, and this the social contract theory of I cannot say people are wrong. And so the church has adopted more and more this secular mindset, and it's creeped in all kinds of churches, and it's pathetic. Sin just means that thing we do God doesn't want you to do because he didn't create us to do that. He didn't design outside of God's design. Let's say it that way. Now, I know there's about 16 different definitions in Hebrew and Greek. I'm just keeping this simple. There are sins that we are faced with all the time. It's a sin to gossip. It's a sin to lie. It's a sin to be greedy. It's a sin to have homoerotic behavior. It's a sin to murder, and on it goes. So, what do? Christians, number one, make sure if the subject matter is ever broached, if someone's asking you about a certain behavior, and you know that it's not something Jesus would do, your style concern has to be paramount. Now, these both matter, but I'm asking you now, first and foremost, think, before I talk about this issue of morality, I need to be sure that my bedside manner is like the King. It's like Jesus. A little footnote, interestingly, to me, in the Gospels, how Jesus spoke to people isn't really made explicit. It's just not. We don't have tons of verses saying Jesus was so calming and sweet and he rubbed that prostitute's hair and said, it'll be okay, baby, and God loves you and you're forgiven and you have a friend in me. We don't have that kind of dialogue much at all. We assume it for a lot of reasons because people who were the outcast and were made fun of and kicked out of communities found him very charming and attractive. Not in a sexual way, but in a moral way. And it sure seems to be the case that he was very gentle to them. We also assume he wasn't a hypocrite. When he told people in Matthew 7 to treat as you want to be treated, we assume he did it too. Of course, other parts of the New Testament are full of moral exhortations to be kind and loving and gentle and so forth to each other. It's considered one of the fruit of the Holy Spirit to be gentle. So, Christians, care about your style, care about your bedside manner, care about being gentle and courteous, care about how you treat the person how you want to be treated. You cannot just think of the content. That's wrong. And some people I know, Christians, are just punks. Their style would be under the category of punkish. I don't give a rip what your content is when you come across as a punk. And you're all horrible cause for the Jesus of Nazareth. I'd rather you just keep your mouth shut. Because this is human psychology. Whether you like psychology or not, whether you think psychology is of the devil or not, the way God designed us is, we remember how people made us feel. We always remember how people made us feel. We've got a few seconds when we meet a person. And the brain automatically decides, is this friend or foe? Is this a murderer or not? Do I feel safe? It doesn't matter if the person is conscious of that decision. It doesn't matter. They're not always thinking, is this person safe? But the brain sure is. The brain is trying to adapt whether or not they're safe or not. And if you come out with your style and your guns are blazing, and I think blah, blah, blah. And that's the worst case example of the bad style are the picketers with, fags go to hell and all that. Just despicable, horrible, non-Christian, pagan, evil ways to do it. Their bedside manner is the worst, outside of those who kill people who disagree with them. They're awful. It's very unchristian. So, Christians, care about your style. Now, let me say one quick word about that before I move on to content. While we are desperately caring for our style, while we are trying so badly to come across as gentle, courteous, kind, loving, you need to understand that it's not your job as the Christian to go on the offensive and make sure everybody knows what sins are. It is not your job to go on the offensive and make sure everybody knows around you what the sins are. It's just not. The New Testament does not say that's your job. In fact, in the New Testament, what is the model? You can see this in places like 1 Corinthians 5 and other places. What is the model is that among Christians you can. Among Christians you're supposed to get the 2x4 out of their eyes. Around Christians you're supposed to make sure they're not doing these unchristian things because they know better. They've been baptized. That's called moral accountability. What we do not have example of in the New Testament is that Christians go out of the way to tell non-Christians that they're a bunch of dirty, rotten sinners. Now, already in your mind, what you hear, David thinks we need to back away and not stand up for truth. I didn't say we back away. I didn't say we don't stand up for truth. What I said 2 or 3 times was we do not have the job of going on the offensive to make sure everybody knows what a sin is. That's not right. You're sinning. God doesn't like that. He hates that. You're going to hell. That's just not our job. It's just not our job. You need to let that sink in. Jesus called us to make disciples, not sinless people. Jesus called us to make disciples, not sinless people. Too many Christians are so convinced, if I can get that gay man to stop going on those gay dates, if I can convince them this is a dirty, rotten sin to act out like that, I'll save them. I will have done a good. Jesus did not call you to make sure the gay man doesn't go out with the gay guy. He called you to make people his disciples. Talk about Jesus, not about all the sins they're committing. You do not have to get them cleaned up because, and this is great news, you can't clean them up. You cannot clean them up. So, in your style pursuit of godliness and trying to be so kind, your bedside manner is wonderful, let go of the feeling of responsibility that so many Christians have that it's our job to be the moral police and to get everybody cleaned up because that's what they're supposed to do. No, that's not what you're supposed to do. Your job is not to make people sinless. Your job is to make sure they understand who Jesus is. And you're presenting Jesus in a way that's attractive because Jesus is an attractive character. If you do it right, he is. He's profoundly attractive. This guy is unlike anything that's ever been in the history of the world. Moving on to content, and I'll wrap up. The content matters. Christians, hear me. Content matters. The second major problem I find in the churches through the years, and this is so sad, not only are most Christians bad at style, they're really bad in content. They don't have a clue what the New Testament actually preaches. Yes, the Old Testament matters too, yes, but we're primarily a New Testament people. That's the new covenant. Christians in the church most of them don't have a real good clue what Jesus actually taught. I've met so many Christians who've been in church for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and they are infant Christians when it comes to content, to doctrine. They don't know biblical concepts. They don't know even all the books of the Bible. They don't know where basic themes are to be found in the New Testament. They're just ignorant. They're profoundly ignorant. Every single week they line up to these mega churches, pastors who just spoon feed them this shallow pablum. And okay, sounds good. That's the milk I know. And they don't know content. They think the Bible really does say God helps those who help themselves. Well, that's just stupid. It's not in the Bible at all. There's people really do think the serenity prayer used by AA meetings and so forth, is in the Bible. No, it's not. People don't have a clue. So you've got to know content. Now, I'm not saying you have to be a biblical scholar, but dadgummit, get to work. And if you don't know what the content issue is on whether it's good to gossip or steal or homosexual behavior or whatever it is, then you certainly need to keep your mouth shut because you could do worse by saying something false. So do research. Do research. Read your New Testament. Read a good Bible commentary, a good Bible dictionary, and figure out what the New Testament actually says about it. So wrap up, be very confident and clear in your style. Style should be like Jesus. Winsome, kind, gentle, welcoming, safe. That is to say, you need to communicate, I am your friend. I am not your enemy. I'm not a murderer. I'm not going to make fun of you. I'm not here to embarrass you. I'm never going to make a joke in your expense. Yes, you and I disagree on homosexual behavior. Yes, We do disagree upon that. We disagree because Jesus disagrees with you, and I'm a disciple of Jesus. But before we talk about that, Tim, you need to know that I care about you. I'm for you. I'm not against you. I'm for you. Secondly, yes, let's talk about content if you would like to. When it comes to what I believe what Jesus believed. And Matthew 19 says, man and woman should be married, or they're a eunuch, which means they're celibate. Now, Jesus wasn't just a dude. Jesus was the God-man. And if the God-man says this is the way God designed us to live, I'm going to listen to him. I always listen to the designer. That's why my truck and my car came with a manual. I read the manual to know how to properly operate the vehicle. So I care about that. But I need you to understand that I love you and I care about you, regardless of our view of the morality. And I'm telling you, when you build relationships with people like that, and they really see that you're safe, you're not just selling them a bunch of nonsense words, they really see that you're safe, they will be more open to your content. And remember I said this, you don't have the responsibility to make them washed up and sinless now. That's not your responsibility. Your job is not to make sure they understand that sin is a sin, that they get it. They've got to get it right now. They're all going to hell. That's not in the New Testament. You show them Jesus and tell them about Jesus too. And you let the Holy Spirit do its great work. And of course, you pray for them and all that stuff, of course. But I mean, in the conversation. So if you're at work and someone's bringing up some issue that you know is controversial, you don't agree with it, you don't have to hold up your hand and say, I think this is all sins, you're all going to hell. Have a good day at work, guys. That's not your role. But if they're telling jokes, they're all giving high fives, breaking out the birthday cake or the cake, celebration cake because of something, you don't have to celebrate. You don't have to think that joke is funny. You don't have to sign the card to celebrate the sin. No, you don't. But David, they're going to make fun of me. They're going to think I'm bigot. They're going to say I'm offending them. Yes, they probably will. But you're so awesome with your style that they're going to say this when they're done. When they finally comes out and they realize you have a different view than they do, you have won a huge victory if they leave that party that you didn't celebrate or that joke you didn't laugh at and they go, something's different. If they leave and say, I think David and I'm talking on the other person's perspective. I think David and I completely disagree. I think David thinks that's wrong because of his religion. I think we see it very differently. But I know this for a fact. David is always so kind to me. He's always so courteous. He treats me like everybody else. Then you have scored a huge victory for the kingdom of God. Let them see this style, and then when it's time to talk content, be sure you know something about what the New Testament actually says about it. And even when you talk about content, you don't go from nice guy to jerk. You still talk about content in a way that's nice and gentle and kind. And one little tip there, when you talk about content, stop talking about what you believe. Stop talking about stop saying, well, I believe, it's just me, what I believe, it's what my childhood. Stop saying that kind of stuff. It makes it sound like it's your opinion. You like chocolate ice cream, and I like vanilla, and it's all relative, and you pick whatever religion you want. That's stupid. You need to talk about Jesus. Let Jesus speak for himself. Let Jesus speak for himself. That assumes you have to know what Jesus actually said, but just talk about what Jesus said and how he treated people and so forth. And if he's not just a dude, who he was, who he is, and then you follow him. So you didn't make up these rules as you went along. It matters who Jesus is. Style and content, sisters and brothers, style and content. We can do better. And it starts today. Don't give up. I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for listening to A Glimpse of the Kingdom. If you want to listen to more, go to my website, davidpendergrass.com, and look at one of the tabs that says podcast. If you click that, it'll take you straight to my podcast on iTunes, or you can search for it on iTunes if you want to, A Glimpse of the Kingdom. But also my website, you'll see another way to get, if you're an Android listener on your phone or you just don't use Mac computers. Again, davidpendergrass.com, and click podcast. It'll take you exactly where you need to go, and you can subscribe from there and get this as often as you like, and also see my blogs and so forth. If you want to get me to come to your organization or church, otherwise to do some consulting, you need to go to davidpendergrassconsulting.com. davidpendergrassconsulting.com. You'll see the information there. If you want to reach out to me on Twitter, you can find me at Dr. D. Pendergrass, at Dr. D. Pendergrass.